He is the Member of Parliament for Chaguanas West to speak about a situation that is developing, and this is with respect to the repatriation of citizens who are stuck in ISIS concentration camps in Syria and Iraq. So let me welcome Mr. Dinesh Rambally. Good morning, sir, and welcome to AM Prime.
Good morning, Keaton. Good morning to your viewers and listeners. At the outset, I want to apologize for my voice this morning because I am pretty much under the weather. So I will try to participate as best as I can. Thank you for the welcome.
Well, Mr. Rambally, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And nonetheless, I know that, being under the weather and still waking up so early in itself is a challenge. And I'm very much grateful for the opportunity and for the conversation. But following your article, it was actually a column that was published in the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday on Monday, the 10th of April. Starting first, you have been advocating very strongly for the timely repatriation of citizens stuck in Iraq and Syria. Maybe you've also specifically mentioned the children, suggesting that some innocents that were born into this, who've only known anger, who've possibly only known hatred and grew up in radicalization, well, it's time to bring them back home. You also alluded to the story that was mentioned of an 8-year-old boy who has not been able to access education following his arrival here in TNT with his mother from Turkey. But with all these factors in mind, how are you able to assume, given the fact that radicalization, anger, hatred is all these children have known, how are you able to assume that we can successfully reintegrate them back into society here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Keaton, thank you for your observations and, of course, your question. I have been advocating in this matter because I deem it, and I think internationally it is deemed as a humanitarian crisis. This is really a humanitarian effort that a lot of countries are engaging in seeking to repatriate its citizens. I, of course, have singled out the children because I am of the view that the evils of the parents should not be visited upon the innocent children. I am saying that if it is as a society, we have certain rights and freedoms. And Trinidad and Tobago, as most people will know, we have signed on to certain conventions, namely the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Geneva Convention, which is 1951. You have the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, etc. We also have, when ISIS came to the forefront and was threatening the world on a huge scale, you had Trinidad and Tobago's accession to the UN Security Council Resolution 2178. What countries accepted when they acceded to that resolution was that they were combating extreme violence. And so it is called CVE, countering violent extremism. And therefore, it contemplated that there may come a time when the measures put in place, the harsh measures, necessary measures, but accepted to be harsh in treating with these terrorist fighters, that you would try to now have a situation where you would try to reintegrate those in society. And if I remember correctly, it is clause 13 of that particular resolution. Other countries have engaged in this process, so Trinidad and Tobago is not unique in that respect. I have indicated that for me, the fundamental focus where we need to place the most amount of attention is what are the needs and risks of children and other individuals who are not prosecuted for crimes that they may have committed while in a conflict zone. It may be Syria, Iraq, Turkey, as the case may be. And therefore, we have to determine, do they pose a risk, a security risk to the community? It has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. We have to weigh national security concerns, but that has to be weighed against international human rights.
Mr. Rambally, if I may just stop you on that particular point. We have to vet on a case-by-case basis. Now, on that particular issue, I'm not entirely sure as to how aware every citizen is of the fact that there are those who were in Iraq and Syria and perhaps part of ISIS, whether or not they're innocent, returning to Trinidad when they have been returning for quite some time. Now, because there has been no legal framework in place and nothing as such that has been detailed, whether it be from the Ministry of National Security or the Office of the Attorney General, to mitigate risk to national security due to radicalization, is it that before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail, given that there have been citizens who perhaps are radicalized that have been returning for some time?
And Keaton, again, thank you for that observation and question, of course. I agree. We are not in a position to determine the extent of the radicalization that has taken place. But the fact remains that we owe some duty to these children that are languishing out in the conflict zones. And this is the reason why the onus is on the government. And this is not a political statement. This is much bigger than any political party. This is not a political issue. This is a humanitarian effort. This is why I have asked openly. Questions have been posed, and I suspect it will come up at the appropriate time in the parliament for response. But in the public domain, I continue to ask the question, what type of framework could be used to facilitate these children's healthy and safe reintegration? And other countries have been able to do it. It cannot be done alone. This is not about Dinesh Rambally. It is not about Minister Amy Brown. It is not about any political party. It is about all hands on deck. We have international agencies, particularly human rights groups. You also have the United States. You have the United Nations. Everybody came on board as recent as last week, Wednesday, just prior to the Easter weekend, in Canada, where they repatriated some 19, I believe it was 13 children and 6 females. But it is something that we have to engage in, because globally, all of the studies show that, and the experts say, this is a global statement, that the longer these children remain in the conflict zones and they are not repatriated, the risk is much bigger to national security, because they will become radicalized, and that is another ISIS generation in waiting. So this is Trinidad and Tobago. I am a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, I'm a member of parliament. But as a citizen, I am concerned that whether we accept it or not, some of these persons have actually returned to Trinidad and Tobago. Some are due to be deported because the Kurdish forces, Rojava and other entities out in Syria, are not going to allow these detention camps to just remain in existence for an indefinite period of time. They are going to start taking steps of their own.
Well, Mr. Rambally, in repatriating children to Trinidad and Tobago, if given the current state of affairs here in TNT, and if we were to take a microscopic view, given the level of crime and the rising violence within society, if these children have been stuck in concentration camps in Iraq and Syria, and they're susceptible to abuse or even radicalization, again, given the current state of affairs, who's to say that things are going to be any better for them coming back to TNT?
No, but Keaton, you're speculating on the opposite side of the spectrum. I am detailing what I am saying with a rationale, with some facts. This is a global issue. This is not limited to Trinidad and Tobago. Is it that Trinidad and Tobago government and people of Trinidad and Tobago are saying that there are no circumstances whatsoever that we can help our own nationals and the children of our nationals out in Syria? Is that as a society that we are saying? I am not in a position. This is why we need all hands on deck. This is why the government has to put in a framework. And the longer it takes to put in a framework to attempt the reintegration of our children in our society, those who are out in the conflict zones, it is the greater risk that will be posed to us. Are we going to sit down and bury our heads in the sand? Or are we going to take a position that, look, this is a crisis that actually exists. This is a crisis that we have to meet head on. This is a crisis that we have to put aside our differences and work towards, getting everybody on board, international agencies, seeking assistance where we don't have the resources ourselves, seeking the assistance of the Islamic community, who, as far as I am aware, because they have spoken to me, a lot of the Islamic entities in Trinidad and Tobago, local Islamic entities, are prepared to assist in the repatriating exercise, to put the adults on bonds, to have them prosecuted as the case may be, if it is they are alleged to commit certain crimes, and also even apart from that, that they be put on something called the civil contract, meaning that they will submit themselves to a restriction of movement and to submitting themselves to be checked at certain points according to according to national security concerns. But the children, this is where my focus is. The children are the persons who are languishing out there in inhumane conditions. They are languishing in conditions where they are subject to the most heinous types of abuse, sexual and otherwise. And we cannot turn a blind eye to this crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis, and we cannot afford to be coy about it. The discussion is far more advanced as to whether or not we should repatriate these persons. Mm-hmm. These persons are going to be placed in a position where they will be deported or they will be returned at some stage. The question is, what do we do with all those 72 plus children who are languishing out there, ranging from the ages of 4 years old to 16 and 17 years old? How are we going to deal with them if it is they continue to be there for another 3 or 4 years? Some of them being teenagers now, but will subsequently eventually become adults.
Well, Mr. Rambally, furthermore, the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday has reported, and please correct this if this is wrong, of your intentions to travel to Syria at the end of June with, and I quote now from the Newsday, to engage in cross-border identification, verification, by ascertaining that those who are there are actually born of TNT nationals. Now, the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Dr. Amory Brown, has urged caution. He says that he cannot stop you, he can only give advice. I mean, why take that risk? I hear what you're saying on a humanitarian level, but if you yourself are suggesting that this is beyond politics and we should not politicize this issue, would you say with confidence that you are satisfied with government's intentions and perhaps their ability to carry out this process?
The confidence will come with the government indicating clearly what their policy for reintegration is. Hilton, the population must understand that the government has not said no to repatriation. That was not their last statement, which was made a couple of weeks back, about 2 weeks or so. The government, in fact, said that steps are being taken. And to aid the process, they set up a 3-member committee. So the government has not said anything about no to repatriation. The confidence in this whole thing is if the government can indicate clearly what their policy is in terms of repatriation and reintegration of children and others, what is their policy in terms what associated legislation will be implemented, what systems or mechanisms will be put in place to reintegrate successfully these children, as well as protect national security interests. Mm-hmm. I noticed yesterday, that the Minister of National Security, and I believe it was a media invitation issued yesterday for the opening. This is what is headed on the Ministry of National Security's media invitation, opening of the head office for the Committee for the Repatriation of Nationals from Overseas. So that is a telling heading. And it says that the Committee for the Repatriation of Nationals from Overseas invites all media houses to attend and cover the opening of its head office. And this is today at 4:30 p.m., 9 Court Street, San Fernando. So it says the Minister of National Security will be in attendance, etc., etc. So I don't know where this discussion is coming about from. Can we successfully do it or not? That has to be, the onus of that is on all of us, but particularly the government, to say what policy. So if it is they're opening a head office now for a repatriation committee to actually occupy, we have certain questions, and they have asked from the media reports, the minister and the member, or maybe the head of that committee that the National Security and the Prime Minister has put forward, that 3-member committee. They have asked Mr. Nizam Mohammed and but Minister Hines and Nizam Mohammed are meeting families today. That is what one newspaper report says today. Mm-hmm. So I would urge all all family members, all media houses to attend the opening. And I would urge everyone to ask the government, where is the policy that drives this opening of this committee head office? What resources are going to be allocated to it? What is the remit of the repatriation committee? Will the government finally tell us what is the returnees strategy? What is the policy for reintegration? So these are the things that this is where the conversation has to go. It really is not up any longer afford any longer to play politics with it.
Mr. Rambally, I think, my apologies, we've more or less out of time, but I'm going to squeeze this question in. Would you advise or encourage, from a humanitarian level, any fellow Trinbagonians who will make the trip to Iraq or Syria to help with this exercise? I mean, you've stated your intention. Would you advise or encourage others from a humanitarian level to travel as well?
Well, it has to be something that is focused. It has to be something that will assist the process. I noticed today in media, one of the print media, that Mr. Nizam Mohammed has indicated him being the head of that repatriation committee. He has indicated that myself going to a conflict zone for the purposes of cross-border identity verification will not hinder their work. That is something that I pointed out in response to Minister Amory Brown. I will not encourage people to just simply go to a conflict zone. The purpose of going to the conflict zone is anything that is done to seek to repatriate will be premised on cross-border identity verification. In other words, we must have something that tangible that we can hold in hand that will say that, yes, these persons who are in fact seeking repatriation are nationals or children of nationals. And that is something that is a process that will have to be undertaken anyway. Well, the discussion should not be focused on Rambally going to Syria. For that purpose, the discussion should be on what policy, what framework, what associated legislation the government is saying that it has in mind to put in place, announce it, and let all the international bodies who are prepared to assist, because we will need assistance, let us get that ball rolling with a timeline. We have been here before, Kitan, in 2019, 2020. You all will recall, the population will recall the Nightingale Committee of 2018. We have been at this exact point in years gone before, since 2018 coming up. Yeah. And therefore, at this point in time, look at how many years has gone, 5+ years since the establishment of the Nightingale Committee. Since then, persons have come back to Trinidad and Tobago. The government should also tell us how many persons, according to their intelligence, have actually returned.
Well, Mr. Rambally, my sincerest apologies, sir. We very much over time, but I want to thank you very much for your time and your presence on AM Prime this morning. And I know that you're under the weather, so I appreciate it even greater. But keep well, sir. Keep well. Get better. And who knows? Maybe your questions may be answered following yesterday's media release by the Ministry of National Security. But for now, let's end it there, sir, and all the very best.
Thank you very much, Kitan, and to your viewers and listeners. My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Keep well.